Hello, my name is Jamonte Lee, and this is my Lab 5 challenge for your hacking skills. One of the first things we have to do is plan and organize a penetration test. And this is basically going to be a penetration test for a host called Metasploitable 2. What I like to do for planning is use frameworks that are already in existence, such as the cyber kill chain or a cyber attack kill chain. There are several different companies that have different kill chains. FireEye is one of them. eSpin here, as you can see, is another one. But using the cyber kill chain, it shows you what order to do things in and what needs to be done. So first you have your observation, or where you would actually do your scanning. Then based on what you discover in your reconnaissance phase, that's when you'll leverage malware or try to enumerate things that you find on things that you found through scanning. You can exploit the vulnerabilities that you find, and then you would escalate your privileges. And then once you're in the system, you'll go through, try to find things that are important, things that you can take off of the system, and then you'll set your backdoor so that you'll have access to the system. Then you want to, when you believe you want to go ahead and erase your trail, basically hiding your backdoor so that no one can find it, and stop your attack from being monitored. And then that's when you take the data off of the system, exfiltration, as you call it. That's when you're taking the data off of the system. The tools that you want to ensure that you have ready before you start your testing are your scanners, your platforms, and your frameworks. And scanners are things like Nessus, Burp Suite, um, Zap, OWASP Zap, and things of that nature. Platforms would be something like Dirtbuster or something like that, where you're using a platform that you can actually use to look for directories and things of that nature. That could also be considered a scanner. I think a better example of a platform would probably be, I guess, yeah, a good platform would be Burp Suite or OAuth Zap. Those would actually be platforms. Whereas your scanners would be something like Dirtbuster, Nmap, things like that. And then frameworks are things like Metasploit, SearchSploit, Venom, MSF Venom, and things like that. These are frameworks that you can actually use. SQL Map would also be a good framework. These are frameworks that you can use in order to maybe help you actually pull off an attack. It could do some of the hacking for you to some degree, things like that. So you want to make sure you have all of these things ready, downloaded, upgraded, ready to go before you actually start the pen test. Because it could waste a lot of time trying to get those things spun up once the pen test has started. Why is a penetration test so important, or why is penetration testing important? Is because it helps you find vulnerabilities, understand the knowledge gaps that you have. So, for instance, maybe you find a vulnerability and you've never heard of it before. Well, this is a good time for you to learn what that vulnerability is, how important it is to your system, um, or how dangerous it is, I should say, to your system, and what you can do to actually fix it. This is how you fill in knowledge gaps like that. It's also a good way to discover what's on the network, especially if you're coming into a network that's already built and running. This is a good way to discover what's there, how vulnerable it is, whether it's even needed or not, things like that. So, especially like I said, when you're coming into a network that's already been built, this is something that you most definitely want to do. And then it's also a good way to test the blue team. That's exactly what red teams actually do. They use penetration testing in order to test the blue team. How fast does the blue team respond? If I touch something over here, or if I trigger the IDS or the IPS, how quickly does the blue team respond? Do they respond at all? Do they respond correctly? Do they have the tools that they need to even respond? Things like that. So penetration testing is very important to an all-around network. Now, how I would handle failure? Uh, I would say failure is one of those words that's a little bit ambiguous, if you will. I don't necessarily see anything as failing because you're going to learn something regardless of what you do. So if you fail to follow, say, your procedure, uh, you're planning, you're reporting, you're gathering information. you're probably going to have to do some of these procedures multiple times anyway. So there's always a chance to go back and do it again. So I don't necessarily see it as a failure. You know, that's why I kind of put on here no failure in following security procedures, because I don't really see that as a failure. You may skip ahead and you may miss some things, but you're going to have to do this multiple times anyway. So I don't necessarily see that as a failure, but I do understand maybe skipping ahead and missing certain vulnerabilities that you should have caught. So you want to ensure that you complete the testing in its entirety. Make sure that you've gone through the planning, you've planned what you're going to do, you do your scanning all the way through. That's usually one of the problems I have, is not scanning enough, and missing vulnerabilities that I could have taken advantage of, especially during a CTF. So I guess that could be considered a failure, but I am learning from it, so I don't see it as a failure. So the risk assessment and the gap analysis for this particular host, Metasploitable 2, Um, basically, what I did here is I used the NIST security framework here for the gap analysis and the risk assessment. Um, Basically, we're going to do the scanning and testing of the host, and then see what impact. The impact is usually automatically assessed by Nessus. But we also have ways of using CVSS, the CVSS system, and the OWASP Top 10 to kind of determine to make other determinations of how serious a vulnerability or a risk is. Then we want to select the tools or the way we're going to mitigate said vulnerability. Most of the vulnerabilities that we found are going to be could probably be fixed either with an upgrade or an update, or with reprogramming the code, uh, the underlying code to the web application. And that'll usually fix most things. Closing ports is another thing that you might want to do, things of that nature. So we want to identify what we can do to fix any of those issues. Then we want to implement or add those mitigation controls and document how those controls were deployed. That's very, very important. You want to document how they're deployed, why a certain port is open if it's going to be used. One of the things you'll see with Metasploitable 2 is it has a bunch of open ports, and nobody can probably tell you why any of them are open. So you want to basically document all of that information, and how you fixed it, or what you've done to fix it, because this may become an issue later on, especially as things change. So uh, you definitely want to have a documentation on why certain things were done, why mitigation controls were implemented. Um, then you want to assess and determine if the controls are working. And you can do this usually by rescanning it and seeing if the same vulnerabilities show up in Nessus. You want to see if the same ports are showing up in maps showing that they're open or anything like that. Um, Another way you could do it is just by looking up the version numbers and seeing if the version has changed. Um, yeah, and things of that nature. But rescanning is usually probably the best way to assess if the controls are working. And then, of course, you want to do continuous monitoring, making sure that the system is working properly. It hasn't changed since you implemented any of your mitigation controls. Update the controls when necessary. New updates are coming out all the time, so make sure you're updating everything as necessary and keeping up to date. And this is basically the risk assessment or gap analysis of Metasploitable 2, or what I would do if Metasploitable 2 was on my network here. So first I want to show you is the Nessus scan here. And the Nessus scan showed quite a few vulnerabilities here, most of them informational, or at least what Nessus believes is informational. We had quite a few critical ones with about four of them here, four high ones as well, some mediums, and most of them medium in the 18 range. Most of these can be fixed either by reprogramming or by updating. And I'll show you one of them here. This is a high one. This is a remote file inclusion here. This actually popped up on almost all of my scanners all the way through, so that's why I wanted to show it here. And basically, This is what Nessus is saying is Metasploitable 2 is vulnerable to. And of course, here you can contact the vendor for a patch or an upgrade. This is OWASP Zap. And what I'm showing here is the alerts. I went through the spidering and everything like that, but the alerts are what's more important here. And so it shows here we have about 10 external redirects, 20 path traversals. We have remote file inclusion over here, so it's showing that same remote file inclusion again. Some remote code execution here as well, and it even shows the CVEs that you could look up that this web page might actually be vulnerable to. And absence of anti-CRF tokens, that's something else that Nessus also showed. So so this shows quite a few vulnerabilities here, but it also shows where you can find ways to fix it or ways to exploit it. You know, whichever side of the coin you're on during a penetration test. But these are things that you use in order to be able to fix it as well. This is the Nikto scan here. I don't really like Nikto too much, although it does find quite a few things here. It's a little hard to read, as you can see. But the first thing on here that it's showing is that the server, the Apache server, is out of date. Not only is it showing that it's out of date, but that anti-click jacking is not present, so that's a problem. The index looks like the index directory here is it was found with content, so that it's able to actually list out all of the other directories that can be found on here. Um, Also, the trace method is vulnerable on here, so that allows for cross-site tracing attacks, things like that. Yeah, it shows Apache's out of date. So it shows things like that. Like I said, I like Nessus and Zap and Burp Suite a little bit better. But this does show some of the same things that I was finding with Nessus and Zap. So we definitely know we're on the right trail here, and we know we need to fix some things. One thing Nikto does do that I do like here is that it does give you websites that you can go to where it can show you how to fix these things. So it's showing you, you know, the Mozilla web page, NetSparker. Here's one here, Wise Force. So it shows you a bunch of different websites that you can go to get some of this information, more information on these vulnerabilities, and possibly what to do to fix them. So that is one thing that I do like about Nikto. This is my Nmap scan, and it's showing it's showing all the ports that are open, and it's showing the services that are running on those ports. I couldn't get everything in on the screenshot here, but it is showing everything that is open and what's available here. Almost everything on here is out of date or has some kind of vulnerability that can be exploited. So this whole thing is just it's just vulnerable. It even has on here, if you look here, let me see. Yeah, a metasploitable root shell is already sitting here, so that's uh, that's fun. I was playing around with that a little earlier. So here I'm showing a list of vulnerabilities that I was able to find. This list is comprised from vulnerabilities that were found on all of my scanners. So Nessus, Nikto, and OWASP Zap. I labeled some of these on my own. Others were labeled by Nessus. So I just used the same label of whether they were high or critical or low. Um, so you kind of get an idea of what can be found here. All of these are vulnerable to some kind of attack. Some of them are, you know, it could be vulnerable to an attack, but you might not find anything since Metasploitable is not actually used for anything. So that's why they're kind of being labeled at a medium or even a low, because even though you could exploit it, nothing can be found. But there are quite a few things here that you can go after. The Apache web server itself, PHP MyAdmin, that's another big one, and the PHP info system. Here's some more here. Um, the FTP port is out of date. That's very dangerous. That can be a very critical one. Um, this Metasploit root shell. Um, and then the local file inclusion that we found earlier. So yeah, and then Telnet, this is another one that's very critical. You definitely don't want these to open or out of date if you're going to have them open for any reason, just because it's very easy for an attacker to not only attack these, but to also escalate privileges once they're in your system. So yeah, these two ports are definitely ones that need to be closed. Well, I would definitely close 23. I don't know why FTP is open. Maybe somebody does need to move some large files around or something like that. So that would be a different story. Okay, so here I'm showing uh, basically some of the countermeasures that I would take here for mitigation. So, of course, I would upgrade or update the services, recode configuration files, and then close or filter ports. Filtering ports would have to be done using a firewall, but of course, there's no firewall on here, so that would definitely be something that I would definitely be doing. Anything that's going to be touching the internet, I want it going through a firewall. By implementing any or even all of these countermeasures, the vulnerability should be mitigated. That's the expected results that I would get out of that. And then, of course, my mitigation strategy would be to conduct scanning again to see if the vulnerability persists. May need to run a scan several times just to determine whether it was successful or not. Um, Once I've determined that it is successful, we move on. If it's not successful, then we're going to find out why that vulnerability or that risk still persists. So that would require research, maybe even more testing, possibly even just ditching that service altogether and using a different one. There's a number of options you can have after that point. And all of this reduces the risk by ensuring that the vulnerability is not there anymore, showing which vulnerabilities do still persist, and then gives the tester their next target. So, of course, once you're done with mitigating one vulnerability, it's time to move on to another one. So we went ahead and we started hacking Metasploitable 2. So the first thing I did after going through Nmap, after going through all the scans, determining what I wanted, what vulnerabilities were there, and then choosing which vulnerability I wanted to go after, I decided to go after SSH. That's usually an easy way to get onto the system, but still requires you to know a little bit of information. FTP, that's an easy hack. Brute forcing, well, actually, brute forcing is the way I decided to go about this. But SSH is usually something that's fairly easily to brute force. So I decided to go after that one. I just did a CTF where I've done this one, so uh, I decided to use some of the information I found there. I originally started off using a search for OpenSSH because that's the service that is actually running on Metasploitable 2. And as you can see here, I did OpenSSH here. I searched it through Metasploit. I decided to use this one, the auxiliary scanner, which is number 3. That did not turn out to work in my favor. I couldn't get the scanner to work. It didn't really find anything. It was just a horrible time altogether there. So I and these are the options here to try to get it all set up and running. I couldn't get anything. This is what kind of came back. Just a bunch of random names, nothing of any use or anything like that. I did try some of these out; they didn't work. So I decided to try something different. So I went back to the search and I tried SSH login. So see if I can find something where the scanner will actually try to log in for me as well and make sure that the login actually works so I don't have to do two things at once. And so we use zero here, the auxiliary scanner for SSH login. And here's the options here, some of the things that you have to fill in. So I went ahead and I filled in the R host. I also changed stop on success to true because if it finds multiple usernames that it can use, it'll try to log into all of them. So you'll end up having like 5 or 6 sessions open. So I told it to just stop at the first one that it found. Um, And then I did end up using a password file and a username file. I hadn't set them up yet at the time that I took this, but I did end up using a password and username file on my one out of my word list. And here's the exploit going through. Here's the session once it started. It found the username and a password. Um, there's also, I'm going to go back here one second. There's also an option. It's further down to actually use the username as the password as well to see if that works. And that's how I was able to get this attack to actually work. Uh, so it automatically logs you into SSH and lets you know what you're logged in as, which you're automatically in as root, basically. So uh, there's no need for privilege escalation. You pretty much already have it at this point. Um, so I went ahead and listed out. I just listed out where I was. I was I was in MSF at admin's home. So these are the files that are in there. And then I went ahead and tried to see if I could get into root, which I could. So you have root access already. Um, so basically, that's the entire attack. So now I want to go back and actually do some mitigations for Metasploitable too. Uh, and those mitigations are, close ports that don't need to be open, upgrade services, security application development, secure application development. I'm not good at that. I don't really know how to program very well. I'm learning Python right now, so I wouldn't be able to do the secure application development. I'd have to bring someone else in for that. But I can set up firewalls and stuff like that. I can do the upgrades. I can close the ports. I can add in other security devices. I don't have any of those right now, but I could add those in as well. So we started off with closing ports. So I closed the SSH port, which it actually allowed me to do. So I was able to kill the PID where the service is running, which is what shut down the SSH port. Uh, and then I rescanned it. So this is Metasploitable 2. I'm on the inside of Metasploitable 2. As you can see here, PID 4167 is the SSH PID. That's where that service is running. So I killed it here, and then I rescanned it using Nmap. I rescanned the IP using Nmap, and as you can see, SSH is no longer in the list. And no, you can't see the entire list, but I was able to go all the way down and see that SSH is not on there. In fact, it was actually listed up here originally, in between FTP and Telnet, because as you can see, they're in numerical order. And yeah, it's no longer listed there, so SSH is shut. That is what it allowed me to do. Is kind of the only thing I was able to actually do. One of the other things I would like to do is upgrade or update the service versions on there. That would have really fixed it. I tried for a couple of hours to actually get that done. It did not work. Come to find out later on, the people who created Metasploitable 2 created it to where you cannot upgrade it. So I cannot upgrade it. I couldn't get it to update. But I did show on here how I would go about doing that. So I would use the app package manager in order to upgrade the service itself. You could also update the entire OS, which will probably update the packages that you're looking for. Um, but I would also go back and upgrade the actual version itself and just make sure. You can also look to download the current version from the vendor site, as you can see in this picture here. This is how I would do it for the PHP My Admin. I would just go in, download the new one from here. You got to make sure you find out what the newest version is and add that in here. You unzip it, and then you want to make sure the configuration is correct. And I also added that on here too. Make sure the configuration is correct. Sometimes just by upgrading it, it'll fix the configuration on its own. Some packages, some very commonly used packages like the Apache packages will do that. But I don't think PHP MyAdmin will. So you want to make sure you go in there and upgrade the configuration. The next thing I would do is secure application development. Again, I don't know how to program very well yet. I'm still learning Python right now. Eventually, I will know how to program though. I do intend to know Python, JavaScript. Then I think we'll jump in with something like maybe C++ or C Sharp, one of those two. Uh, but I do plan on knowing how to do secure development. I'm learning a little bit of SDLC right now, just from learning like the CISSP and things like that. So I'm learning about secure development. And one of the things you can do here, or some of the things you can do here to make sure you have secure application development, is use your scanners. Use Nessus and Burp Suite to find possible application programming vulnerabilities. And they'll show you where you have programming vulnerabilities and things like that, where certain headers are not present, or certain things are not present in the underlying code. Um, Veracode is another good scanner for that as well. Not only, and I have Nessus and Veracode on here because they give you, this is Nessus that we're looking at, and we're looking at that remote file inclusion. Well, if you look further down, it'll actually show you what the underlying code that, um, the output code that Nessus used to see that it was vulnerable to a remote file inclusion attack. Now, what Veracode will do is it'll take it even further, and Veracode will actually show you what, or suggest to you what you could do to fix these issues over here. All right. Another place you can find some stuff, or information that you can use to fix the underlying code is the OWASP Top 10. Also, W3 Schools has a lot of good information for secure programming. Reddit is actually another great place to find secure programming. A lot of programmers and hackers hang out on Reddit, and they can actually show you several different ways to actually code something. If you can't find it, just ask. I promise you, at least a bunch of, at least five people will come in there and they'll show you three different ways to actually code something, or what you could do to change it. So you don't even have to give them a whole lot of information, just what you're trying to do. And they can give you a good way to code that securely. It's a great way to learn. There are other program related forums that you can go to as well. Um, online. Just like Nikto was showing you earlier, that's what it was showing you. Was a lot of those are forums where there are programmers hanging out, and they can tell you. I wouldn't say hanging out, but where people have asked questions before, having similar situations that you may have, and where programmers were able to help them fix their situation. As far as my mitigation implementation, I have my I want to answer several questions with my implementation reasons. What will fix the majority of my vulnerabilities? I want a list of all the risks that have already been patched by a vendor site, so I can go ahead and download those and get those going. So what will fix the majority of my vulnerabilities? That kind of answers the criticality portion. A list of all the risks that have patches that are already made, so that I can get that going. That is the expedience. That answers the expedience part. The work's already been done. All you need to do is just download it and get it going. And then which services need to be reprogrammed for security reasons. This is going to be in the cost section because, again, if you don't know how to program, you're going to have to bring somebody else in that does, and that's going to cost money. Also, reprogramming things can cost a little bit more money as well. It can be could be not cost effective for you. I expect the vulnerability to be mitigated, and I expect the system to still work as intended when I fix it. However, we always know that that's not going to always be the issue. So be prepared for that, and that goes into our lessons learned. Be prepared to use more than one tool. Always have a backup resource because some scanners are going to miss some things. So you always want to have a second opinion. Keep track of why you have a port open and what service is running on it, so that if that service is no longer needed, we can close that port. Be prepared to start over if you have to. Be prepared to just be like, it'll be a lot easier to just mix the whole operating system and start all over again. All right. I also learned that scanning a system is the most important thing because, like I said, my scanning skills were horrible before this, but now I'll definitely be scanning a lot harder in the future. All right. Well, thank you. This has been my lab number 5. Thank you very much.